Markets crashed almost 7% in a single day today on Friday. I think we were just like 0.5% off the circuit breakers, so basically the trading would have paused. So let's see what economist Richard Wolff thinks about where we're heading.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Global stock markets are tumbling after President Trump unveiled the biggest hike in global tariffs in modern U.S. history, including a 10% blanket tariff on all imported goods from about 185 countries. In addition, many U.S. trading partners, including the European Union, China, and Japan, will see even higher tariffs. China now faces a total 54% tariff. Trump announced the plan during a speech in the Rose Garden at the White House.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make...
So people may not agree with this, but based on my research, there is a plan. Now, I don't completely agree with the plan, but it seems like the plan came up with Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and Miran. Stephen Miran, he's the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors to the United States. He has a big role in the administration. I cannot find what the role is, but this is his plan and Scott Bessent's plan. Basically, the plan is to bring back factories while keeping the dollar high. Now, let's see if it works or not, but at least we know this. This is not just random stuff to get negotiations going. There seems to be some kind of plan. Now, I don't know if they were expecting almost 10% drop in 2 days, but that's what they got.
Gonna make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and
the economists fear it could lead to a recession or worse. Trump's trade war could also shift global alliances as countries seek new trading partners. China, Japan, South Korea have already announced plans to increase trading ties and coordinate their response to Trump's tariffs.
Okay, I think that was actually fake news. I know Trump likes saying that. China was saying that they're working with Japan and South Korea to put up a united front in Asia, but Japan and South Korea both said, no, there's no such discussions going on. They're not partnering with China. So a lot of news articles, a lot of news companies did pick up that news when it first came out. And I think it took a day for Japan and South Korea to deny it.
We begin today's show with Richard Wolff, professor of economics emeritus, University of Massachusetts Amherst, visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs at the New School. He's the founder of Democracy at Work and hosts a weekly national TV radio program called Economic Update, the author of a number of books, including most recently Understanding Capitalism and The Sickness is the System, when capitalism fails to save us from pandemics or itself. Professor Wolff, it's great to have you with us again. Well, start off by responding to, and were you surprised, shocked, or do you guess that, well, about 185 countries were going to see increased or tariffs?
On the one hand, we knew something like this was coming. On the other hand, the sweep and the scope of it does make you stop. Mr. Trump is right. It is a changing moment in American history and world history. But I think his representation of what's going on is completely fantastical and has only to do with the self-promotion that he is engaged in most of the time. It was never foreigners who did it to us. This notion of the United States as a victim, we have been one of the greatest beneficiaries in the last 50 years of economic wealth, particularly for people at the top, just like him. It has nothing to...
I mean, that is true. Like, for him to say that everyone's taking advantage of us. We are the richest country. Even, like, you go overseas and even middle class. I know people like to say that middle class is disappearing, but just the fact that a lot of the families have houses and 2 cars, 1 car, sometimes 4 cars. It's like incomprehensible in many, many parts of the world where people don't have that. Of course, that doesn't mean they're not problems to fix. We can fix it, but just to say that America is like people even here, the title is kind of like America is crashing. I don't know. I don't think that's true in any sense of the world.
With foreigners taking advantage of us, this attempt to make himself strong and powerful relative to others, to blame the foreigner. These are cheap shots that a real president wouldn't do. And there's the most important point. The American economy is in trouble. The American empire is in decline. We don't want to discuss it in this country. We engage in denial, and instead we are decline. We don't want to discuss it in this country. We engage in denial, and instead we are striking out at other people, a sad way of handling a decline. The British Empire declined before us, so did all the others. We are now at that point. We had a great 20th century. 21st century is different. You have to face those problems. That's not being done. What's being done is to say we have difficulties, but they're all somebody else's fault, and we're going to solve it by punishing them. I would like to point out, as you suggest quite rightly, Amy, that the rest of the world is not going to sit by. The United States does not have the power it had in the 20th century. It is not in the position it seems to imagine itself. When the
I mean, that's true. I guess we don't have the power we had after World War II, but we still have a lot more, like, the biggest market is still the United States. So all the countries who want to retaliate, we have a lot more stuff we can tariff compared to they can tariff that comes out of US. So yeah, we could still argue if that's a good thing or not, but we still have more cards we can tariff them against.
Secretary of the Treasury added to Mr. Trump's comments that he warned the rest of the world not to retaliate. That would imply that if they do, there would be escalation. Yes, he said, there will be escalation. Well, nothing will guarantee more escalation than if they do nothing, because then it's an invitation to Mr. Trump to keep doing it as each of these efforts doesn't work.
Given how dramatic this was yesterday, is it possible he was deciding this to the very last second as they put this off? And explain exactly. You're a professor, you're a teacher. Most people don't even realize how tariffs work.
Okay. A tariff is a tax. It's just a particular tax that got that name. It used to be called import duty. All it means is when something comes into the United States that was produced outside and is brought in to be sold, it has to pay a tax, as literally as it crosses our border into our country. It is paid by the American company that brings it in, which may pass it on to the consumer, usually what happens, and the tax goes to Uncle Sam. It goes to Washington. Mr. Trump loved to suggest that tariffs were paid by the others, a little bit like Mexico would pay for the wall. Never happened. It's not going to happen here either. It's an American tax. And there's something remarkable that clues you into how big a change this is, that the Republican Party, which has branded itself as the anti-tax party for a century, is now imposing.
This is the crazy part, because I see a lot more Republicans now speaking out against Trump than I have seen before. But a lot of people also misunderstand tariffs as in like, oh, people will just pay it. Usually when we have a tariff on one country, what the goal is basically is either that country, people who are buying from that country will look at other places to buy stuff cheaper. That's the whole point of putting tariff on one country. But now that Trump has put it on basically every single country, yeah, people will end up paying for it. Usually people don't end up paying as much the tariff because suppliers will just look at other countries to get the products from. But we have it on every single country. I don't think that has ever happened since like 1930s.
The most massive tax imaginable. Why this big change? Because we have big problems, and this kind of slapping the rest of the world is an attempt to solve a little bit of them. But it is not going to work because we don't have the power to do it anymore.
I want to go to UAW President Shawn Fain, who supports Trump's new tariffs, saying last week, we applaud the Trump administration for stepping up to end the free trade disaster that's devastated working-class communities for decades. Fain spoke Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation.
We've seen over 90,000 manufacturing facilities leave the United States. We've seen In the big three alone in the last 20 plus years, 65 plants have closed. And so, look, tariffs aren't the total solution. Tariffs are a tool in the toolbox to get these companies to do the right thing, and the intent behind it is to bring jobs back here and invest in the American workers. If they're going to bring jobs back here, they need to be life-sustaining jobs where people can make a good wage, a living wage, have adequate health care, and have a retirement security, and not have to work 7 days a week or multiple jobs just to scrape to get by paycheck to paycheck.
Well, while UAW President Shawn Fain praised Trump's tariffs, he also said he had great concerns about President Trump's move to eliminate contracts for 700,000 federal workers, the firing of workers at the National Institute of Health and other agencies.
I was a bit disappointed. I like Shawn Fain, many of us do. But this was disappointing. To say, basically, I will support the president because he does something that might help my union, even though Shawn Fain knows, as most economists do, that if you put a tax on the goods coming in, they will go up in price because we have to pay that tax now. And that will lead to domestic producers able to raise their prices because their competitors from abroad are stuck with this tax. So we expect a boost to inflation, which is going to hurt the working class of this country in a very serious way, especially if it builds on itself, which often happens when you do tariffs like this. And I want to remind everyone, including Shawn Fain, that the auto workers also represent workers in places that need export markets, that produce in America and sell abroad. When those countries retaliate, as they likely...
How much does America sell overseas? How much? Oh, wow. In 2023, U.S. exported 1.6 million passenger cars, main one being Canada. Ooh, we exported 1.6 million cars valued around $66 billion, while we imported almost 8 million cars valued at $220 billion. Okay, that's crazy.
We will lose export markets, and that will mean fewer jobs. And no one, let me stress, no one now knows whether the jobs lost from this trade war will be greater or smaller than any jobs that are gained. It is a big risk being taken by Mr. Trump, and if it doesn't go well, it'll be very bad for the American economy. It will produce the recession folks are worried about, because if the prices go up, people buy.
I think Chase Bank, JP Morgan Chase, was saying yesterday that there's a 60% chance of recession. Today they said there's a 100% chance we're going to get a recession in the next few weeks. So, yeah.
Less, and that loses jobs. When you look at all of this, this is an incredibly risky effort to blame the world, punish the world, and then cross his fingers, which is what he's doing, hoping it comes out all right. Reminds me of the football metaphor. This is a Hail Mary pass. You throw it down the field. You hope it bounces into your team's hands. But that's all it is, a long shot. And it's a sign of how troubled the American economy now is.
If you can put this in the bigger picture, talk about the tax cuts and how they fit into the tariffs, something like $4 trillion in tax cuts and who benefits? And then talk about the other issues that President Trump keeps saying that they're not going to touch, even though what many call his co-president, Elon Musk, whether he steps back from being, giving speeches or not, going after Social Security, issues like Medicaid.
Let me start with the tax issue. The biggest single thing that Trump did in his first presidency was the tax cut of December 2017. And when that tax cut was written into law, it had a sunset. It expires this year, 2025. If that expiration is allowed to happen, corporations and the rich, who were the big beneficiaries back then, will face a big tax cut. He doesn't want to do that because that's his base, that's his donor support. He doesn't want to have those taxes go back up. Well, then what is he going to have to do? If he keeps on spending and he doesn't let those taxes go back up, he's going to have to borrow trillions, as we have been doing. He doesn't want to be the president who keeps borrowing trillions, in part because the rest of the world is a major creditor of the United States, and they're not going to continue to do it the way they have. So he's in a jam. He has to do something. So his hope is to savage the expenditures in this country. Look what he's doing. Mr. Musk stands there with a chainsaw to give us the clear implication, I'm going to solve the problem on the backs of the working class. I'm firing them all. I don't care what the rest of the working class suffers. I'm going to fire all these people without notice, without plan. Calling this efficient is a silly joke. An efficient process takes time, takes experts. You're not doing that. You're just wholesale firing. Calling that efficiency is an attempt to fool people that shouldn't make any difference. Mr. Trump is now in a jam. He can't get out of this without in some way solving the problem that has been built up. And there is no way other than the one he's doing, because it's the last gasp of how to take away from the mass of the people the ability to borrow. I mean, let's be honest. If you put a tariff, you make everything coming in from abroad more expensive. That means people will buy less of it. They'll shrink their standard of living. If American companies take advantage of the tariff, which they always do by raising their prices, that will also hurt the working class. You are immiserating your workers in order to try to solve the problem.
This is the crazy part, because I think Milei ran on the platform of like just cutting tariffs in Argentina and getting out of the business sector, not controlling it more.
You haven't solved before. But here's the irony that
I know a lot of people defend the tariffs, where saying it's just reciprocity, which I guess I would defend that too if it was that. That's the thing. We're hitting UK with the 10% tariff, and we have a trade surplus with UK. And all the other countries, we're hitting them with a tariff based on the trade deficit. But then with UK, we don't even apply that formula. We just apply something else. And then, yeah, it's just insane.
The end come back to haunt us. Europe has been unable to unify.
I get the plan. The initial plan is basically we want some manufacturing to come back, because, again, if there is a war, we want manufacturing in the United States, some of it at least, you know? But I don't know if this is the best way to achieve that goal.
Under the umbrella of American alliances. The enmity of the United States is bringing Europe together better than the alliance was able to do. And as you pointed out, very important, China, Japan, and South Korea with long histories of animosity. And
that's not right. That's not correct news. I don't know when this came out. April 3rd. I'm guessing they were recorded a day before that, so they recorded 2 days ago. The China-Japan news is just fake. China, South Korea
getting together to cope with this. Wow, we are unifying the whole world. If you want the big picture, in my judgment, after World War II,
like Japan would never go with China, all the while they're carrying out drills to take over Taiwan. Japan is like right next to Taiwan, basically.
George Kennan taught us about containment. We're going to contain the Soviet Union. The irony, which the philosopher Hegel would enjoy, we are becoming contained. We are isolating ourselves. The votes in the UN are the United States alone, or the United States and Israel and 2 or 3 other countries. The isolation politically, the isolation now economically. We are the rogue nation for the rest of the world. We may not want it, we may not agree, but it doesn't really matter if that's how they perceive us, and that's what...
I mean, if you guys watch Business Basics, you know, like, we have no love for the CCP, maybe even the Chinese business sector, because it's just controlled by the CCP. But all these people who are making this argument where they're like, I'm happy to buy. There are a lot of people who support the tariffs basically say, I wouldn't mind paying a higher price to buy stuff that's made in America. That's one of the stupidest arguments they're making, because you could do that right now. If you want pay a higher price to buy something made in America, you have that options. So you have that option, especially if you're buying online. You can look up companies that just make in America. They usually do have a higher price, and just buy that. Why do we have to force everyone else? And again, we definitely do need to make sure US is less dependent on China. It's just the blanket tariff that's like, I think, scaring the market a lot more than just the Chinese tariff.
Talked about South Korea, Japan, and China joining together. One of the biggest announcement of tax cuts was against Taiwan. It's just a little more complicated for Taiwan to join that group.
And also, another one was Vietnam, which got a very heavy whack. I mean, is there no recognition of what the United States did to that country?
I mean, I don't know if that's comparing apple to oranges, but Vietnam, another issue that we have with the manufacturing in Vietnam is a lot of the factories are not really factories in Vietnam, especially if they're owned by the Chinese companies. They're just warehouses where the product comes in from China, they take out the made in China label, they slap in the made in Vietnam label, and then they ship it to United States because they just want to avoid the tariffs that Trump 1 put on and then Biden put on. So just to avoid the tariff, they just use Vietnam as like a warehouse base to swap labels.
Maybe you wouldn't want to crush them with this kind of a thing after, as I'm saying, this is a change. This is a sign to the world that as the United States empire declines, this is a nasty place that's going to, gesture and thrash around, doing damage everywhere as it copes with its own decline.
Former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis recently wrote a piece headlined Donald Trump's Economic Master Plan. He wrote, quote, "This is what his critics don't understand. They mistakenly think he thinks that his tariffs will reduce America's trade deficit on their own. He knows they won't. Their utility comes from their capacity to shock foreign central bankers into reducing domestic interest rates. Consequently, the euro, the yen, and the renminbi will soften relative to the dollar. This will cancel out the price hikes of goods imported into the U.S. and leave the prices American consumers pay unaffected. The tariff countries will be, in effect, paying for Trump's tariffs." Do you agree with that, Professor Wolff?
I mean, this idea is basically what China did in Trump 1 when Trump put on tariffs. I think they were like 10-20%. China just devalued the yen or yuan. Basically, their plan was like, if we have to pay 20% extra, we'll just devalue the currency so the price is the same. China cannot really do that this time because if we take in all the tariffs in account from Trump 1, Biden, and then China also has a 25% tariff because it buys Venezuelan oil. That's like a secondary tariff we put on as like a way of sanctioning Venezuela's oil industry. So China has 100% tariff, basically, some of the goods at least. So they really cannot devalue their currency out of this.
No, even though Giannis and I do a lot of work together, so normally I defer to him. He's wonderful in his analysis. I don't think this is correct. Is it a possible outcome? Yes. We're in a situation, let me put it this way. Tariffs are not new. They've been around for hundreds of years. If you teach a course in international economics, which I've done, you tell students, here are 1,000 books, here are 5,000 articles. We know. And the answer is, when you impose a tariff, you don't know what the outcome is because it depends on everything else going on. Interest rates, exchange rates of currencies, rising or falling economies around the world. You can't know in advance. It's a very risky thing, which is why for the last 50 years, we have had, administered by the U.S., something called free trade or neoliberal or globalization. All of that is over now. The United States can't win anymore in that system, so it is reverting to economic nationalism. And that's a fundamental shift that throws the world. It was the accepted wisdom for 50 years, the last 50 years, not to do what Mr. Trump is doing now. If you want, you can think that everybody who thought that way for 50 years was wrong, and Mr. Trump, the genius, is correct. But that would be a long shot. Better bet he's trying to save his own political life, and he's trying to cope, to his credit, with a declining economy.
I don't think, because for Republican Party, this is like, it's not trying to save the political life. It actually kills their chances of winning the economy. I think the argument that they have a plan, again, they're trying to implement their plan, and it's not really Trump's plan. I don't think it is at all. I don't think Trump knows macroeconomics at that high of a level, and that's not trying to like take a shot at him. I don't even know it at that high of a level. I think this is a Scott Bessent and Stephen Miran plan, which Trump probably agrees with, or other way around. It's like they they probably joined with Trump because they thought that Trump would agree with their plan. And the whole plan is basically to bring the manufacturing back, reduce debt, all the while maintaining the dollar's reserve status, which just explaining the goals, it's like a very complicated goal. So it's not going to be easy to achieve. Good goal to have, but I don't know if this will achieve it.
Without having to admit that that's the case, this won't end well. It normally doesn't. And what we're going to see is the fighting against one another of the Europe bloc, the Asian bloc, the American bloc, at a time when the United States is weaker than it has been economically and politically. Look at the debacle in the Ukraine as well. The misunderstanding that the Russians could turn to the Chinese and the Indians to cope with the costs of that war in a way that hadn't been calculated. And that's turning out to shape the outcome. And it's not a question of which side you're on, but just watching how it lines up. That's the problem.
30 seconds. As you often talk about, are you saying this is the beginning of the end of American empire?
Yes. I think we are already in 10, 12 years.
People were saying that when Japan was rising, it was beginning of the end of the American empire. We're still here. And I understand that's the hard part about making predictions. Usually they are wrong. Vast majority of the times, predictions are wrong. It is a hard thing to make predictions.
Of that decline. It can't. Here's a single best statistic. If you add up the GDP, the total output of goods and services in a year for a country, of the United States and its major allies, the G7, it's about 28% of global output. If you do the same thing for China and the BRICS, it's about 35%. They're already a bigger block of economic power than we are. Every country in
BRICS are not as close to the G7 at all. G7 across the board, they have a lot more similarities than BRICS has. India, China have their own issues. Russia, China are economic partners, I guess no limit partners, but even then they have a lot of disagreements. And I guess you could say the same thing about G7 since Trump came into the office, especially the Greenland stuff. It's crazy.
In the world thinking about building a railroad or expanding its health program. They used to send their people to Washington or London to get help. They still do. But when they're done, they send the same team to Beijing, New Delhi, Sao Paulo, and they often get a better deal. The world is changing, and the United States could cope.
I mean, I don't know about that because I just know this because I guess there are billionaires from like China and India who come to US to get treatment. So I guess that's he's trying to make a point, but he's using a bad example to make the point.
As with alcoholism, you have to admit you have a problem before you're in a position to solve it. We have a nation that does not yet want to face what this all adds up to.